Okay, we are live. My name's Aaron McLaughlin. I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand. Not that that really matters. It's yeah. Well, you can take that personally if you like, Keith, but it was more about, where we are in space and time. Yeah. You're the fall guy. You're the fall guy. It was a good movie. Take it away, Keith. What are we talking about today? Submodalities. Personally, I've found submodalities to be one of the most fascinating and interesting parts of NLP. And submodalities, in a nutshell, is if we think of the way we see the world, that is a modality. And if we think of a submodality, then seeing it in colour or black and white is a submodality. And so modalities can also show up in how we look around, but they also show up in how we speak to each other about our world. For example, you might go, how's your day going? And someone says, the colours on the trees today. And you speak to someone else and they might go, wow, just the feeling of the air today. And someone else might go, wow, just, the sound of the birds. And so you've got three modalities there. You've got your sight, your kinesthetic, which is your body, and then you've got your audio, which is how you hear. But then you'll also have, tastes great today, or something like that. So there are the three kind of major senses that people use in their language, and then within those senses there is the sub-sense or the sub-modality, which is how they are experiencing that sense. And so when we're working one-on-one or one-to-many with clients, we'll often be listening to the way the person is describing their perception of the world. So the way they're perceiving their world, their internal representation, if you like, of the world outside, will come out in their language. And we hear that every day, but we don't really necessarily pull it out and go, oh, they're describing this visually. And certainly in this world that we live in, where so much of our world is very visual now, there's a lot more, well, can't you see what I'm getting at? Or but you still often hear, well, you're not listening to me, or you can't feel what I'm feeling, or those sorts of things. So how's that sound, Keith? Hmm. And when we talk to kids, it's great sometimes because they have such an unfiltered way of internalizing their world and presenting it again to us. So when we ask them, what have you been doing? They'll go, oh, they'll be looking up for their their visual recall, and then they're not really sure about telling us about what they've done, they'll kind of generate some images or something like that. And so, watching kids can be a great way to see how that works. So when we're looking up, generally, we're kind of accessing the visual part of our memory, or the visual image creation part of our brain. And to the side is audio digital, isn't it? Yeah, so it's more like kind of generating internal sounds. And then down here, see, I'm reverse oriented, so I get a bit confused when I'm demonstrating, but down to one side is internal dialogue, and to the other side is your kinesthetic, how you feel. So you might, for example, someone who's feeling very depressed or doing depression will often be down here. They'll be talking to themselves a lot, and they'll be feeling really bad about what they're saying, and then they'll be, and this will be this constant, and their body posture will be down like this as well. Yep, it's really, so they'll have a real kinesthetic, but they'll also have like an internal dialogue that's going, and that's that kind of self-perpetuating loop of depression, for one example. Whereas someone who's like really high, they'll be up like this all the time. They go, oh. Mm. Yep. No. You could be pulling the information. No, yeah, and you could be pulling stuff out of your memory and putting it into the right place so that you can express it properly. I mean, I had a great experience. I had something stolen, and I was being interviewed by an insurance agency guy, and he said, well, so what were you doing on that night? And I said, well, I was at an NLP course, which was the truth. And he goes, well, there's no point watching your eyes, though, then, is there? Because you could just be lying and doing it, knowing, it was just like, I said, seriously? I said, well, I'm reverse oriented, so you won't get it right no matter what you do anyway. Yeah, it's telling the truth, yeah. But yeah, it's not a good way of doing it, and any person who's adept at criminal investigation stuff will tell you that anyway, because the whole process of, going to court, we're constantly reconstructing our memories anyway, because they've got to make sense in the present moment, so we've got to reconstruct them, and that's where court of law is. That's why police, when they get back into their car, they'll sit in their car for about 5 or 10 minutes writing down every single thing that went on when they came to your car to give you a ticket, so that if they have to go to court, they've got an absolute record of everything that went down, and they know that you won't. As an example, of memory. Yeah. Yeah, we do. Yeah. So, what part do submodalities play in memory? Oh, yes. Best. I love phobias. Snails. Yes, I worked with someone. They couldn't leave their house anymore because they had such a. She literally had to be picked up and put in the car to come and see me. Snails, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the questions that I like to ask in NLP is so teach me how to do your phobia. And and there's multiple reasons for doing that, but one of the useful reasons is to bring it to the conscious awareness, because most phobias after a while become unconscious. We're just suddenly fearful of this thing. So for this person, it was I mean, I could immediately see she went like that, which is normal, the response where something is very close and very big and right in front of you. And first thing I said to her, well, wow, how big is it? She goes, it's huge. So seriously, it was really big. And I said, wow. And I said, and how close is it? And she goes, wow, it's real. It's like it's right there. And she turned her hand and faced herself. Wow, and seriously, is it in colour or black and white? And she went, it's in colour. Just brought her hand up again when it's in colour. So I got out of my chair and I went over and I pulled her hand away and I said, what happens when we do that? And then I put her hand down and took my hand and replaced it and went further back. And she said, seriously, can we do that? So what had happened was the submodalities were the size of the visual, because phobias are generally very visual. So there was a size, there was a closeness, there was the colour, and it was a movie. It was a very oozy movie, like it oozed. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there aren't many snails that big. Yeah. 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 And so when I pulled it away, her body softened. So the colour in her face dropped down. Her eyes stopped dilating as much. So there are significant shifts in her internal experience. And then I said, so if I bring it closer, and she moved away again, and then I pulled it away. So, but the essence of it was, and then I said, well, and then I sat back down, and we talked about it a bit longer, and I said, so, and we talked about something else, I think it was, which is quite useful. And I said, now can you just think of the snail again? And the snail had changed its size already, and it had already moved away a little bit. And it was just, and what we understand, I think, is that happens because the brain suddenly realizes that it can change, that it's not a default position anymore. Yeah, and as soon as it realizes that it can change and that change feels better, or that new choice feels better, well, it wants to feel better. Yeah. And yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, well, that's the idea, isn't it? More choices. Mm. 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 Yeah. And interestingly, there are a number of ways of working with a phobia. And yet working with these submodalities is one of the more effective ways of opening the doorway to helping the person shift it, and at the same time to give the person the idea that they can shift it. That it's not actually out of their control. And because that's the problem with a number of these challenges, like phobias is that, well, it's just happening to me, and there's something wrong with me, and it's I've got this fault in my neurology, and actually fundamentally a phobia is designed to keep you safe. Phobia is designed to keep you away from that thing that could potentially cause you massive harm. And if it was like a venomous snake, it's probably a very good idea to have a kind of a phobia to that sort of thing. And yeah, certainly, thank you, sense of caution. Yeah, living in Australia, where so many of the beasts are trying to kill you. So a sense of caution is is viable, is useful. Yeah. Yes. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I think, and if we take it to the next level, if we want to help that person fully, because the challenge for some people is, well, can I do this on my own? And so there's kind of like this idea that, when you're a small child, you touched a hot iron. Everyone touches something hot. And, and my joke around that is, well, you didn't need 3 months of therapy to kind of work that out. You touch that thing, it's hot, its neural pathways are created in an instant, and that's how quickly you can create a whole new neural pathway set, and that will keep you safe for the rest of your life, more or less, outside of mistakes. And so, well, why should it be any different when you're changing a phobia? So what we can often do is say, well, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to just bring that picture to mind, and now what I want you to do is very, very quickly push it away and make it smaller and make it black and white as you push it away. So do all that really quickly, but in your mind go whoosh. And the reason why we go whoosh is because in our minds, when we have a phobia, we often go, oh, or we'll do something auditory in our head, and what we've learned in NLP is if we run two modalities together while we're making a shift, the shift will be a lot stronger. And so if we go whoosh, and then what we can do, and this is called the swish. There is one pattern called the swish pattern, which it's not a specific set rote way of doing it. It's a strategy that we work out how the person is structuring their phobia, for example, and then we utilize the structure of the swish with their existing structure, if that makes sense. But one part of it is then to immediately replace their mental phobic image with an image of themselves in a healthy, resourceful, happy, self-controlled state. So you're kind of going whoosh, 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 and then whoop, and there's this and it's I've had some clients go like this. So this is how there's stupid movies where there's the sunrise and they're comedic movies, and then suddenly there's this cacophony of choir, but that makes you laugh, and so get this image that's resourceful and and you do that 3 or 4 times fast. Then what happens is the brain goes whoa, 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 and so then you can test it. And that's that's the thing I love about NLP, is because they can come in and get the phobia, even though the thing isn't there. So we can test that straight away. And if we've been able to do our part of the job properly, and they've been able to run the strategy as well as they can, having never done it before probably, then we can test it. And 9.5 times out of 10 is straight away. There's like, oh no, I'm not feeling, because the brain suddenly goes, well, we can change the structure of that phobic mental image and replace it straight away with something that feels good. Yeah. 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 Mm. Yeah. Mm. Well, there's actually, there's a thing there called a compulsion. So a compulsion, this is really interesting when working with coffee drinkers and smokers. So a way to work out if they've got a compulsion is you get them to imagine the cigarettes moving away, and they'll go, because so the compulsion is a little bit reversed. So if you take something away, it's getting smaller, which means they can't have it. Yeah, yeah, and that's it. And so, but ironically, they're going, which is fantastic. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so in that moment, I think the thing we've realized with the Skype is sudden sounds and sudden movements mess with the bandwidth. Yeah, so we just have to slow down, man. Yeah, so the compulsion, but the interesting thing is so that's where you can use submodalities to do kind of almost a reverse of what we were just demonstrating there with the phobia, which is called a compulsion blowout, which is where you bring the thing so close and you get them to intensify every aspect of the sensory experience of that thing until they literally want to gag. The challenge with that, though, is it's kind of that flooding concept, and it can work, but yeah, I'm not sure if it's necessarily very healthy. You've done that with the compulsion. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. 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 Because they'll just replace the cigarettes potentially with something else. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, and also though there's that it's an anchor, isn't it? So the conversation was anchored to certain yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. So that, I mean, that's really interesting in itself, isn't it? So how my curiosity there is, well, what's the connection between intentionality or your highest intentions and submodalities? Because if we intend to do something strongly, one would expect that that would increase the kind of the intensity of how we're going to perceive that thing that we really want to do. And so if I'm suddenly decreasing the intensity of that thing that I want to do, I've got to at the same time, I've got to find a way to speak to the part of me that intends to get something out of this activity. And that's where phobias come in, because the intention of the phobia is potentially safety, security, staying alive, that sort of stuff. And but the difference there is that the person can change the submodality of, say, the snail or whatever, or the spider, but the higher intention is still being satisfied because it doesn't feel so bad. It feels less bad, and I can still feel okay. So the intention is still being, you know, mm, 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 mm. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah. before we started this is interesting to me, but we'll see how we go. But before we started this conversation, I was telling you about how I went to a movie last night. So I took my daughter and my wife we all went. It's not so I didn't take them, we just all went to see Incredibles 2. And Incredibles 2 is an animated thing done by Disney, and it's, superheroes. The thing, though, about animated movies is that they have the capacity to do things with submodalities that are pretty much impossible with your straight digital camera shots, with human beings. So in this movie last night, which was really interesting, it was the submodalities of the movie were so intense. And I wonder how many people will come away from that movie, children, will come, because it wasn't a children's movie. There was too much intense, too many monologues that were like seriously just over most, even moderately well-educated people even. But if you're a child and you didn't know how to filter out or didn't really understand what's going on, there were scenes in this where everything was so huge and dark and intensely, like, I can just remember one aspect of it. It's like a still image of the bag person. I can't remember his name, but Screen Slaver. That was his name. Slaver. Play on words of screen saver, but screen slaver. And the whole undercurrent was about the slavery of watching a screen. How ironic on YouTube. But fundamentally, the snapshot is of this screen slaver dressed in black with some kind of almost like almost like the front end of a motor car thing with big eyes, but which are like TV screen round eyes, and very all black, and but a neon aspect to the suit that kind of lit up. But the whole background, because they were in a cage, so Elastigirl's in the cage with this guy, and he's trying to kill her in the cage, and the cage is electrified, and he's got a taser jabber. I mean, it's horrific shit. And Wendy and I sitting next to each other, because as I said to you, there was a whole 2 rows of intellectually handicapped in front of us, and it was like, oh my God, what's going to happen for these people? It's like there's children, and the kid next to me is a kid next to me who's we're on the back row, standing on his chair. He dropped his popcorn on his chair, trying to get away, but he was at the back of the cinema. He couldn't go anywhere. Horrific. But I'm just the etching, the submodalities, because it's a massive screen, Dolby stereo, black, but the creepy, horrific aspects of this screen slaver person, just 20 foot tall. I mean, I can't imagine this in 3 dimensions. And so this is a really interesting thing, and I think it's when you think about Lord of the Rings, King Kong, all these different movies, what they are expert at doing, and what even the colour of Incredibles, everything is bright red or bright orange, everything is just outrageous, everything that has to move quickly can move so fast, everything's extreme, and I think what that does is the brain, certainly must be for younger children, I'm sure, the brain can't keep up with that amount of information of that such high intensity, so a lot of it just becomes subconscious memory. I just wonder how many kids couldn't sleep. How many of forgive me, but the people in the 2 rows in front of us had trouble. My daughter was in a play centre, sort of a Steiner play school thing, and for what is it called, kindy, Steiner kindy. And there was a boy who was 5, and he had just watched Spider-Man. And it was 6 weeks before he stopped acting Spider-Man 24/7. Like he'd just be up a tree and he'd be flying out and he'd be hurting himself constantly and he'd be jumping all over them and it was like you couldn't pull him out. And that's that, because Spider-Man's just such a compelling, and all that. I'm often interested in this. That this how strongly is the influence, and ironically, this is what Incredibles 2 was talking about. Was that almost kind of I concerned about saying, but that hypnotic is deeply hypnotic aspect of. And how influential a movie can be, to the point where because we don't know what's going on and how to make choices about how we reference what's going on, it actually becomes how we reference what's going on. If you repeat in hypnosis, there's three major things in hypnosis: fixed attention, suspension of disbelief, and repetition. So if you watch a good TV program, or you watch just the news, you've got the fixed attention, you've got suspension of disbelief, because whatever they tell you must be true, and then you've got repetition. They keep telling you the same miserable stuff over and over. I mean, that's a hypnotic paradigm. And then they add layers of submodality, intense colour, intense dialogue, lots of ticker tapes, soundtracks. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. I was just immediately remembering, because I, was doing clown doctoring, and going into hospitals and helping the children, and every now and then we'd walk into a room, and the mother would go, "Oh no, can't do clowns," and then the child, who had no problem with clowns, would suddenly look at mum and go, "Oh, I can't do clowns either." Yeah, really interesting, and it was because of it. It'd be it or some other freaky junk that's been on TV, but because we just wear a little red nose and some crazy clothes, we don't have makeup or anything. It's not part of the process, and our job there is to it's not to create a horror film, but once again they see us, and that triggers that mental memory. But the thing that was always interesting to me is the children were fine until the mum said, and I have to say, it was always a mother, and it only happened like maybe 10 times, which is quite a lot. But it was mainly, but the child, and this is the interesting thing, the child, we noticed, was learning that belief system and learning from mum's response in her linguistics. So my perception, my wonder about that is, do they suddenly see their mum frightened? And the submodalities of that have become quite large, but then associate that response to this thing called a clown. And so then clowns by default become, fascinating. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing about clowns, having done it for quite a few years now, is that it's a very misunderstood thing, and a clown is really a character that represents the true child self. in a sense. This pre-verbal, Charlie Chaplin, the perfect example of a pre-verbal clown, but in normal clothes, but rubbery sort of normal, larger than life clothes, but just a whited out face, but it was a way of tapping into that deeper character, and yet what we've kind of taken on as a truth is that the deeper character is always dark, and actually when we look into the art of clowning and what clowning is about, is actually letting go of all of that, and suddenly you're just this curious being who doesn't know right from wrong, and just knows, it's like suddenly, it's just suddenly it's just this playful loopiness. And so, which brings me to this thing about, okay, so phobias, blah, blah, blah. So what about the positive? How can we use, because we're talking about, one of the reasons we're doing these podcasts is emergent consciousness. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and it was really, really interesting, this woodworking course that I was on, and you're making little things like spoons and knives and things like that, and out of wood and steel, and this man travels all over New Zealand, and he teaches teenagers and kids how to do this, as well as adults. And some of these characters are, in real trouble, like, the family violence, all these different things, on the path to prison, and all these different scenarios, and so getting them into their body so they can start feeling. But we had this conversation about, well, everyone knows what's wrong. We've got a real problem in New Zealand around with violence and around all sorts of different things like this, and a lot of that is internal perceptions, how we represent the world to ourselves, how we represent our childhood to ourselves, and the way that the system operates, or people, or whatever it is. And a lot of these, so many of these disenfranchised people who kind of have no kind of sense of direction. And he was asked to speak at the symposium in Melbourne recently about what he does. And he was so surprised about how so many people were coming to talk, but they had no idea where it was all going. And it occurred to me, which was really interesting, which has occurred to me many times, as well, isn't that their job to sort of maybe start to generate an idea of where we could go? It's like, if someone's an intellectual and they've got a PhD in this and that, and they're traveling all over the world talking about this and that, so many of them can tell us what's going on and why it's so bad, or why it's good, and yet very few can actually. But we don't. The fallback is, but we don't know where it's going. And I wonder about him. Sorry. Yeah, I think that's true, and yet at the same time, well, see, yes, thank goodness, because we understand that. We understand the element of surprise. We understand the element of curiosity. We understand. But you talk to most people, it's like, well, I'm generalizing, but there's a sense of security and safety comes from having a sense that there's something ahead that's valuable and hopeful, and there's some kind of goal or outcome. The challenge with that for me is that any outcome or goal out there in the future is just an altered version of where I am at this present moment, which isn't going to ever work. So, we warned people, didn't we? So submodalities and emergent consciousness, submodalities and emergent behavior, submodalities and emergent community. What's that? What do you call it? Distributed intelligence of. Mm. Okay. I'm so surprised that you've brought up affirmations. I really am. Yeah. Mm. No, 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 no. We've discussed why I don't. That format of affirmation doesn't work. In yeah. We can later. Yeah. Mm, mm. Yep. So you're running a conflict in the first instance, but fundamentally, what you're getting at is the reason I'm saying this is because that's not where I'm at, and 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 there is another reason why it's not a good affirmation. But the essence is there's an internal unconscious conflict, and so yes, it might work, but you've got to win that that positive affirmation has got to win that conflict. And I think that only comes out of intention. It doesn't come out of the words. So the intention drives it. And yet, once again, the intention is fighting with the already pre-existing state, you know. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Well, yeah, in the interest... Sorry. Yeah. No, no, what I was going to say was, and the beautiful thing about finding the intention is actually what you're wanting. You know, so regardless of how, you know, I mean, the paradox is, regardless of how you feel about yourself, the intention is still, is still, you know, high. But where is it because we need to become more conscious of that intention, to bring that intention into the higher intention into our consciousness, so that that influences. Hmm, hmm, Mm. Mm. So is that the right question? Or would it be that, okay, so if I did, I mean, the other kind of question could be, well, if I did this behavior fully and completely, what would come out of that that's even more important to me? Yeah. Because that intention question's quite a big ask if you've never gone there before, isn't it? Mm. Mm. Yeah, right. Yeah, but okay, no, I'm hearing you, but I mean, at the same time, we come back to some modalities and a phobia for snails, for example, or spiders, or whatever it might be. I mean, anxiety. How many people have the conversation? Well, what is a higher intention of anxiety? How many have that conversation? Well, how many doctors have the conversation with their clients? Or how many, but also culturally, socially, we don't have those conversations. So how can we know to have that or to ask that question if that doesn't, the screenslaver would say, we've been educated to have a very kind of, it's kind of like we're looking at the waves on the top of the ocean. There's this whole ocean of possibility and unconscious potential, but we only see the surface waves, and that's the conversation we continue to have. Whereas intention is down at, intention is that big snail on the floor of the, or you know what I'm saying, Yeah. You're saying conscious disconnection. Yeah. 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 Mm. 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 Of course, yeah. Mm. 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 Do you know the interesting thing for me is also, I mean, with respect to the person who had the phobia of snails, it was interesting because finally, after we did the work and it was all like we played with it and we imagined her walking out to the letterbox, because she couldn't even do that, and all these different things, and we tested it over and over. She suddenly pinged and went, "Oh my, I can remember what happened." Yeah, it was quite stunning. And long and short of it, she was in a power pool. Ended up in the power pool, only in half a foot of water, but it was freezing cold, middle of winter. She stuck her hands up. She was 3 or 4 years old. She'd been pushed in by a brother, and sticks her hands up underneath the power pool, and the hole underneath the power pool is snails. So as she grabs hold to save her life, they just ooze down her arms. But the interesting thing was. So the interesting thing is often that this fascinates me is that sometimes people come in and they'll say, "Oh, I know what caused it," and I go, "Really?" Because my query with that is knowing some of the tools is you wouldn't fix that already, So there's this, so are you still 10? You're not 10 anymore, are you? So so you're not in that pool anymore, are you? You're not in that room with that big spider. No, but the interesting thing for me is that they know that it started at this place in this certain specific time with this trigger. but it was so strong. It's like trying to unlearn riding a bike. It's just once you get your balance on a bike, that's it. But once they get that phobic response, it's just. So even though they know, and once or twice someone said, I think it's to keep me away from those things. It's like, so they kind of get a sense of what the intention is, but it's not clear. That fascinates me as well, because there's, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah. So no, I was just going to say, so going forward, once again, I want to get back to the thing about emergence. Because I think it's something that, I mean, the one thing that we're kind of inspired to do in the coaching is more of a solution-based or outcome-based kind of model, which is, rather than tell me all your problems and we'll try to fix something, what is it that you want, as you said? And the challenge that I find about this, well, what I find fascinating about this is that there is let's talk submodality wise. If I'm in a certain position of discomfort, for example, say I've got a phobia, and I've got a phobia of spiders, and I'm off to Bali. I know they've got big spiders, stuff like that. And I'm concerned about what I'll see, or I'm going on a forest walk. So, but my ability to generate a sense of what I want is very much limited by the state I'm in. And so I'm interested, because also if we want to let's move out of phobias for a moment, but if we want a world to, because a lot of people are talking about there's problems with the world, and there's global climate change, and there's all these different things that people are concerned about, the Trump stuff, and there's North Korea, all these different things. So we run that stuff in our head in a certain way. How do we emerge out of that line of thinking using submodalities so that we can feel that even though we're not sure what is coming up, there's a sense that we are generating something that's valuable, something that's worthwhile, meaningful, hopeful for ourselves and our family or whoever it might be. Do you know what I mean? And what does that look like? Is that something we can do or begin to do with submodalities? Yeah. Well, why I said that is, like, as I'm thinking like Donald Trump, for example, just for fun. A certain image comes to mind, and it's colour, and it's blah, blah, blah. So the problem with that is that's quite, even where I put my hand, there it is. And it's to my left for some reason. So if I pushed it away a bit and made it black and white, what happens to its influence on me and my day-to-day behaviour or my thoughts and feelings? Because a lot of people know about Trump. Most of the world knows about Trump, what he's doing, all the problematic issues with that, and his behaviour. So that's, and in the news, it's in every news break, there's something about him. Yeah? I think it's an important question, Keith, because I wonder how many people are out there going, what do you do? Because, if that's there all the time, it's like a phobia. I don't have any control over this. And so how can I have a sense of hopefulness going forward, or creativity with meaning going forward, or the sense that, even though we're moving towards some bloody thing called a singularity, that might actually mean something other than oblivion, where the AI take over and we're all, some, what is it, Armageddon type dystopian future, like Blade Runner. Ooh, God, that was depressing. Forgive me. Yeah. Stick with it. I think, because we're talking about submodalities. Me neither. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Well, it's about, well, it's so that we can stay alive, and that's the most important thing. Yeah, survive. It's a survival thing. I mean, it just occurred to me while you were talking, and it was interesting because I just moved some of these things around for myself. So I just moved them all around, and I just sort of thought, well, that's really interesting because how I've been coding, and I don't mind owning up, because I'm quite fascinated in all this kind of loopy shit that's going on because it's a linguistic conversation, and yet I notice at times it's like, wow, if you got really too in depth in this, you'd kind of lose your mind a bit because it just seems so. I mean, actually, most of it just seems quite ridiculous and childish, to be fair. And we, yeah. So so moving these things out of the way, literally, submodality of space. So there's a spatial aspect to where I put things. So Trump was there. So rather than pushing, I just get it out of my screen time, and what is left is more space to start to generate a sense of what I want. No, 3-4 dimensions. I mean, it's quite, and it's right out, like, if there's a timeline stretching out into the future, and there's a sense, of direction, and there's a sense that it's not influenced or pre-mapped by other people's behaviour. Because the thing is, when you look at some of these archaeologists and some of the guys who are a little bit controversial at the moment, I can't remember any of them, two main ones that come to mind. The guy that wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, and he's doing huge talks at the moment, which are fascinating, but he's talking about, 130,000 years ago there was a major asteroid that hit North America, and they can see there's an obsidian belt that goes all the way out from where it was. But what they're saying was that, any time something might happen. So you can prep as much as you like, but either it's some nutter or someone who's just distracted by their cell phone while driving, or an asteroid, or something similar. But something could happen. And if we try to put all these things in front of us, Trump might do this, or, Jung Kong Yong or whatever, might, whoever they are might do this. Well, suddenly we're obscuring our own vision because we're trying to prep for something that we don't even know will happen. And certainly living in Christchurch, where we've had 59,000 earthquakes in the last 6 years. So, yeah. Yep. No. Hmm. Haven't they seen Star Wars? Haven't they watched a science fiction movie or two, read a couple of books? Yeah. You see, the challenge with that is you're going to get people saying, yeah, but they're so selfish. What about those who can't act for themselves? What are those about those? And so suddenly they're taking responsibility for the... I mean, I had this thing with Greenpeace for years. I used to donate, and then I suddenly... Wait a minute. No, because there was this kind of infernal arrogance around, I've got to save the planet. And what that said to me was, one, I'm somehow now not... It's just humans that are creating all the problem, and I'm one of them, so I'm a sinning human, and which also on one level put me somehow superior. Like, it put me at a level where I was the one who was like almost a godlike custodian responsible for the whole of this intelligent biome, which is so freaking complex. I mean, what were they saying the other day? They've got more maps of the moon than they have of the Pacific Ocean. They don't even know what's down there. And they're trying to, say that we're going to protect it. How can you protect that which you don't have any comprehension of? And every time, and it was something interesting, that, an intellectual from Otago University talking just the other day about the fact she's literally, quote unquote, said every time we try to fix something, we actually make it worse. And that's that kind of deconstructed aspect of, well, we'll pull out this part and we'll just fix that. Not realizing, there's that guy who thought that, and he came out on TED Talks, we talked about this months and months ago, with the elephants. And then he suddenly realized once they'd killed 250,000 elephants, killed them, that culled them scientifically, that it was desertifying at a faster rate than they ever thought possible. So they thought, well, wait a minute. just the elephants. Well, the desert was getting worse. Yeah. They'd taken away the poos. Oh, but the thing that got me was, and then he stood there. But here's the thing: on the TED Talk where he admitted to it, he said, "But now we know the answer." It's like, so we're going to listen to you again? Because now they're farming elephants. Well, look what's happened to, like, Brazil when you farm cows. It's like anyway. But so once again, there's this the scientific deconstruction and chopping up the pieces. And I think this was we were talking about ecology there, I think, and submodalities. So once again, Greenpeace has the sense, well, there's oil and gas. Well, Greenpeace tomorrow would be in the toilet if there was no oil, because their boats wouldn't float and no one would be able to get to a meeting, and telecommunications would die overnight. So fundamentally, but we can't have any more oil. Okay, well, work something else out first. But, and then the other thing is plastics, and then, I mean, the world without plastics, I mean, silicon, all those sorts of things, where would we be? So, and it's oil, but once again, if these are all obscuring my perception, or I wake up in the morning and they're there, I remember going to a Greenpeace party, and this is a long time ago, and I have to be very careful, because the Greenpeace has probably evolved a long way. But I remember going to a Greenpeace party many years ago, it was 30 years ago, 35, and it was in a hall, and it was in Auckland, and there was so much smoking going on, and so much inner polluting going on, that I walked out, because I don't smoke, and I wasn't drinking at the time, and I still don't, and I just walked out, my God, these people are all polluting their environment. It's like, 'cause I was asthmatic at the time, I couldn't breathe. I was like, how does this work? How does that micro not transfer to the macro, or I've gone off a tangent, but I think the challenge is we come back again to intentionality, or unconscious higher motivation or intention, and that is, we're talking here about how do you have a conversation which most of us are not educated to have. If we look at the binary system of politics, it's binary. It's like, in America it's binary, in New Zealand it's Labour or National, if you're lucky, well, it's just, and in England, all these places are actually just being destroyed at the moment. Russia's the same, but fundamentally, it's inherently it's two sides with the bits and pieces in between, and then the real right and left, but and there's this constant, black and white kind of, the leader of our national party at one state one point straight after the Labour got in this year, said our job is to disagree with everything that you say. What went through my mind was, two boys and our Labour would be a boy and a girl, on a school ground. Go, it doesn't matter what you say, I'm just going to disagree with that. It's like, but that's just shit. Yeah, but you're a dick. It's just and there's name calling in the Parliament. And so, well, okay. So how do you have an emergent conversation when I'm right, and you're wrong, and how do you get to higher intention? I've got a really good example. Greenpeace actually tie themselves to a bunch of trucks, out west. And it's a piece of land that they have been told that they shouldn't really be developing into dairy farming, because they have to pull just hundreds of millions of gallons of liters of water out of aquifers to because it's river basin. It's like it's got tussock on it. You can't grow stuff there for cows. And they'll have these kilometre long arms watering. So these Greenpeace people, tied themselves to the trucks and bulldozers, got thrown in jail the next day and all that sort of stuff, and it kind of stopped everything for a day. But fundamentally, it's like, well, are we still having to do that? Is that the belief that you're so right? I mean, obviously, industry and the people who are building these things think they're so right. They refuse to listen to ecology. They refuse to listen because they've got shareholders and they want to make profit and they want to send it all to China. It's like, how do you even broach a conversation when, once again, they're so incredibly polarized just by definition? Because their submodalities are just so massive. Collaboration, maybe? Well, it appears that way from the outside, doesn't it? I mean, we have to say, because we don't know what goes on in those. Well, I mean, yeah. Oh, it's belief, isn't it? It's a level of belief. So you're talking about, no, you are, but you're talking about something that, it's difficult to grasp because people will say, well, I mean, we're totally fed, the Instagrams and the Facebooks and, the Tony Robbins, what you believe is what drives your life, and your beliefs are the most important thing. And yet every single war that's ever existed, every single financial, yeah, exactly, and financial crisis, whatever it might be, is because of a belief. And yet what you're talking about on the same logical level is having a different, is reframing that to, well, what if, so the way it would be is like, okay, if you've got Greenpeace and you've got the farming, and they decided rather than to, well, this is the only way and this is the only way, is to have an ecological decision-making process, which is where they're constantly talking and evolving decisions, not based, both to get their needs met. And that's your emergent stuff. And I think the challenge is like, they had the Singularity conference here in New Zealand, and and a friend of mine went, and he came back because he was staying with us, and he came back every day going, well, none of them know it's going to happen. And I mean, obviously they don't, but fundamentally that was where it stopped. And there were a few who had ideas that, but what came out of it was, and what my friend kind of got a sense was, there was a lot of fear. It was mainly the Singularity was to do with intelligence, like AI, computers, finance, all this sort of stuff, and the fact that at some point control will be lost. Oh, thank goodness! But so control will be lost, and that's control of the essence of what we call a safe and happy culture. But if you look at the underbelly, it's not so safe and happy. But fundamentally, what it meant was that all these people who were PhDs and incredible experts in this and that, giving their interpretation only from their podium of their perception of their submodalities of how they are viewing the world. But they did have, how they have 4 or 5 people up on stage and people ask them questions. But still, there's that, and I think. It's a really interesting thing with Jordan Peterson and some other people at the moment where they're going around, they're actually being invited to different countries and they're having these kinds of conversations on stage about freedom of right, freedom of speech, this whole thing around non-binary or all that sort of thing and what that actually means going forward. And these conversations are quite interesting because they're actually, I saw Jordan Peterson interviewed the other day and he says, well, I don't know where it's going, I don't know what's going to happen in the conversations, but the conversations are leading us to think about things in a way that we never did because there's, a physicist and a psychologist and someone else, and they're not arguing their truth. They're more interested in finding another way and expanding their own at the same time, which I think, and I think that's the only way forward. Well, it's not because we're going to go forward anyway. I mean, but it's a potentially more, yeah. And it's never worked. It's never worked. historically, politically, religiously, it's never worked. Yeah, they've only died. Well, they're dying anyway, but they're gonna. It's not a pleasant death. Yes. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, and I think coming back to submodalities, one way to begin that process is how am I viewing my world? You know, and a good question around that. Okay, so what is troubling me at the moment, and where is that right now? And literally, if it was, how am I perceiving it? Yeah, exactly. And no two are the same. Yeah, yeah. Mm, mm, mm. And what are the yeah? What are the feelings they're creating? Yeah, yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, I mean, you know, most people are experiencing things like anxiety or depression. They only know how they feel. They don't know, and through no fault of their own, and through no um, what would you call mechanical fault of them, they are feeling low or they're feeling freaked out. And but if as we said earlier, if we throw the same stuff at you every day, whether it's through the news reports or whatever, or through conversation, that will start to influence our behaviour, and that's mirror neurons in action. So if we suddenly notice that so our job is, you know, what do I think a good couple of questions is, what do I want, and what do I perceive is getting in my way from having that? And if something is in my way, it'll be perceptually in my way. And so, okay, so what does that look, sound, feel like? What happens if I move it to there? I mean, the number of people I had one person who said to me, "Oh, the way she's just like this." I said, "What?" It was like she's just like this. I said, "Right, and is it right? Is she right there?" And he said, "Yes, it's just there." I said, "Can you see anything else?" So like, and well, no, because and then he kept doing this. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what anyone says. If that is my perception of my reality, and there's someone that I perceive as a big, thick, round object that I don't like in front of me, outside of that way, I can't see anything. And if I can see something through it, it's going to be influenced by that. And that's where the kinesthetic aspect of non-verbal communication is just so amazing, you know, because a lot of people will go, "Oh, it's like, don't do that." Literally they think you're there. And the thing that you're doing to them is there. It's like, and they're telling you that it's there. And that's a sub-modality of visual. There'll be a kinesthetic, spatial, and you could go up to them. You could literally grab it and pull it to the side, and they will change their internal experience. Wow. So if I'm running a Greenpeace thing that we're all going to die because of oil or plastic, and don't get me wrong, or just breathing the shit in the air. Yeah. Wasn't that from The Matrix? Yeah. Mm. 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 Well, I mean, there's that wonderful thing that I often have to remind myself about is the answer is in the symptomology. So whatever I'm feeling is either the answer is either within it or is accessible through it. So if so plastic, if that's what's pervading my perception, it's the wrong thing in the world, then, well, how do I have a relationship with that somehow alters or gives us an insight as to how we can use, and people are doing that, clothing out of plastic. They're making all, there's a whole company down in Dunedin who's got too much plastic now because they're making road signs and junk like this. And, but on the other side, there are alternatives to plastic. You can make plastic out of hemp. You can make plastic out of all sorts. So it's an interesting conversation. But I think also, and this is the thing that I think we'll get into at another time, is the problem of dissociating. When I become the Greenpeace advocate, I'm now dictated to by the Greenpeace advocacy and its roles, its philosophy, and blah, blah, blah. And that's what hit top-down approach. And so I dissociate into that role and stop having a clear access to what drives me, what is my higher intention, what is my greatest need. And I think this came up the other day because forgive me, I saw the most fascinating, I'll say, conversation it was about non-binary, someone who's non-binary gender. So this whole thing now is non-binary gendered, and but there was this kind of group of people, and there was a non-binary gender woman. Forgive me, but she was woman. She's a person, but biologically, she's a woman, and this was the fascinating thing. But what outside of who you want to choose to describe yourself as, the interesting thing to me is, so if I go, I'm a man, I'm not. I'm biologically male. And yet I get a sense that sometimes, there's the sense of viewing that. Like the self views anyway. So I don't know. But what I want to say is, so if I'm, okay, let's say I'm a male. Yeah? So if I then go, well, this is going to get off. The challenge that I have is the more we label ourselves, the further we move away from being able to have a clear experience of what and who I actually am, and knowing what that, and I'm not saying that, if I suddenly decide I'm non-binary gender, the challenge with that is I might have a penis and I'm classified biologically as a man. Now if I have breasts and a penis, I'm classified differently. I can't remember, it's yeah. And well, no, it's not. It's forgive me, but what I'm saying is there is a biological fact to the design and build of this thing called a body, which I'm not sure, unless I have a sex change, I can alter. So that's who I am in the physical embodiment sense. Now, if I suddenly go, okay, and I'm as a human being, I at best of times have quite a challenge with that. I have challenges with being a human. I have challenges as a male. I have challenges with sexuality, possibly. I have challenges with all these different things, as we do as humans. So then that might be so strong that I go, well, what if I become this, which is non-binary specific? Haven't I just moved across? I've moved out again, or I've moved out into a label which is meta 2, which means, and now I'm thinking that that's who I am. But tomorrow I might decide, well, I'm gay. So I've stepped out of that, changed my submodalities and changed my belief. But the thing is, why do I need to label myself? Why? What's the higher intention? What is it that... You see what I'm saying? And we can talk about this some other time. But I woke up thinking about this recently because this has come up a lot in discussions on these long-form things on YouTube and stuff around, with... just because it's very big in they've changed laws in Canada and these sorts of things, and it's really influential. A lot of people are getting hurt because of it. But to me, it seems like, well, it's a removal. I'll admit, I'm a white guy, middle class, in his 50s, which is perceived globally as privileged and all that sort of stuff. So should I be making comment on this? But fundamentally, yes, I do, because what I'm also aware of is I've worked with thousands of people suffering from dissociation from who they really are. So they don't know what they want, they don't know what they need, and they don't know what resources they have. So they dissociate into thinking there's something else. And well, it is, yeah. And I think that's what I'm getting at. And I think, what happens is, I agree, it's a really difficult subject. And yet what I notice is I'm wondering, excuse me, it's getting dark here, what are the internal representations of that perception of myself that means I should dissociate? How can I be aware of those first? Go, well, I'm actually feeling really uncomfortable, because the challenge is if I jump into that non-gender specific, I'm even more of a minority. I'm even more disenfranchised, and I'm even have it's I can't imagine being. I try sometimes, but it's not my role. Is to imagine being a real minority. I don't know how else to say it. And the possible sense, and I've heard this many times, of having to explain myself. I mean, I know because I do hypnotherapy, and I have done for years, I've had to explain myself to so many people, and to explain, because it's such a misunderstood aspect of our consciousness, and it's been manipulated so ferociously and wrongly in many respects. And so why, and I didn't know that until I started doing it professionally. But why would I jump into, to get away, and to become something that I've got to spend my entire time because I mean, this woman who was having the conversation, she biologically, on every level, is a female of our species. So she now has to spend her entire time asking people to say to represent her to themselves in a way that is acceptable to her, before she will feel like she's accepted in herself in that conversation, because she's no longer, it's like, wow, what an effort. And it's all just, it's like, whereas if it was just in the ongoing conversation about, I'm having a conversation with another human being of the species, and we're just enjoying that. Outside, and that's so hard as a male sometimes, and because there's these wonderful things called females, and for me, I'm as straight as a die, and it's like, there's wonderful things called and it's and it's difficult sometimes, and it's just because that's the wiring. But now, but outside of that, it's a human being, spiritual being in a human body, human being. We're just having this, but if suddenly that's not binary anymore, it's not, it's a meta state. It just makes it so much more difficult. Right. Well, I mean, this woman would not accept that she was biologically a female. Now, to me, that is I'm sorry, but I mean, that sounds dissociated, and sounds almost schizophrenic, because I'm no longer having a true experience of who I even am. It's like what is it? People who are anorexic, who have total body dysmorphia. They see themselves as overweight. Yeah. So we're gonna have to call this, because this is. I think we could start this up. Well, it was me, and I viewers, forgive me. You probably switched off already, but if there's a few of you still watching, it's like, but maybe we'll pick this up. But once again, this is about, because here's the thing. One last thing, we're talking about emergence, we're talking about submodalities, but fundamentally it's about emergent, and I think sometimes there's what's called in Sanskrit is known as the mistake of the intellect, which is where we get an impulse for truth, which is the true self wanting to be known, or the essence of what we are and what we want to do, our dharma or whatever you want to do, is coming to the surface, and it's not resonating well with what is going on at present. So what we do is we look outside of ourselves for the answer. And depending on who's there or what's there or what the political climate is or whatever, we're going to go, oh no, that works, that's what I want to be. And suddenly we're even further away, because we've associated into something that is even, because the essence wants to, and suddenly we're over there. Yeah. Namaste. Yep. And the emails at below, which all the spam engines have already soaked up and are going wild with. So until next time, thanks, Keith. Lovely. We'll see you soon.